I am ready, and we are rolling, as they say.
Okay. The following presentation is a service of ATG Trust. Today my guest is tax lawyer, tax expert, and Forbes.com favorite son, Rob Wood at Wood & Porter in San Francisco, and the host of the Tax Law Channel here on the Legal Broadcast Network. We're talking about another great article that he's written for Forbes entitled 10 Tax Tips for Stock Options. Rob, thanks. Oh, you look good, by the way. Thanks for talking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
With stock options, there's a couple of things you need to be aware of with regards to tax. There are some traps you write about, and then there are some advantages with these. Let's begin and talk about the types of stock options available to people.
Sure, and I should stress that I get a lot of questions from people about stock options, and I guess most typically it's not at the sort of entry stage. That is, it's not when people are being awarded stock options in connection with their work, their employment or contracting work. They don't necessarily have to be employees. But the time that I tend to get the questions is either during some transaction when they're exercising options or selling shares, or even worse, after the fact, when they're trying to figure out what the result of something they've already done might be. And so I want to start with the two fundamental types of options. And if you have options, and I guess this goes for people operating companies as well, if you're awarding options, you should be very clear whether the options are incentive stock options or non-qualified options. So incentive, sometimes abbreviated as ISOs, incentive stock options, or non-qualified options, two very different sets of rules.
Well, the ones that receive the best tax advantages probably would be the ISOs. Am I correct there?
Yeah, no, that's right, Scott. And people tend to think that ISOs are great, and indeed they are. They're probably more likely to be awarded to rank and file workers as opposed to executives. Executives are more likely to get non-qualified options or a blending of the two. As you say, ISOs are taxed very favorably. The basic treatment is when you get the grant of the options, no tax. When you exercise the option, which typically you wouldn't do unless the price of the shares were going up, so you're getting a bargain. When you exercise, again, no tax, but I should stress, no regular tax. And that should tip you off that there's a bit of a tax trap waiting in that one.
And I guess that's what you're talking about when you refer to the AMT or the alternative minimum tax.
Right, and people, if you should, hopefully you're cringing when you say alternative minimum tax or AMT, because it is kind of a cringing item. It's creeping up and affecting more and more U.S. taxpayers every year. There was a time in my career, probably 15 years ago, when there was a significant movement to repeal the AMT, and it actually seemed like that might happen. It's quite clear now that just fiscally we could never afford it. It certainly should be cut back, but for many of us it applies, and it applies with a vengeance. And so when we say there's no regular tax but there's AMT, you really need to crunch the numbers because it can be debilitating.
And if you're an executive, then you are probably more likely to receive the NSOs or the non-qualified stock options, right?
That's right, and there are limits in the case of ISOs. So if there are really big dollars at stake, that is huge dollars, usually they're going to be non-qualified options that you're considering. But I really stress, if you look at the documents, you should be able to tell what your options are. Look at your option plans, look at your grant documents, look at your employment agreement, and make sure you know what you're getting.
Well, what is when these stock options are awarded and then finally redeemed, what's the tax difference between an NSO and an ISO inherently? And maybe we can, I guess I'm still a little confused. Maybe we can explain that.
Sure. Well, first of all, let's go back to ISOs. So ISOs, again, forgetting the AMT for a moment, which I guess is dangerous, but putting that aside, so no tax when you receive a grant of ISOs, no regular tax when you exercise the options. So again, let's just use a simple $5 or something is your option price. The shares have gone up to $10, so it's a good deal. You want to exercise. You do exercise the ISO. Again, there's no regular tax at that point. And then later, a year, 2, 3 years later, you sell the shares. When you sell the shares, if you have done it right, and I'll get to that in a moment, you're going to get capital gain treatment on the sale of the shares. So that's obviously that's good. When I say if you do it right, the danger is you need to make sure that you're holding the shares that you acquire with the option for at least 2 years after you exercise it. So this catches a lot of people. A lot of us are used to the capital gain, long-term capital gain holding period of 1 year. We think if we've held something for a year, it must be long-term capital gain. In the case of these ISOs, again, there's a special rule and you need to hold it for 2. Now let's quickly turn to non-qualified options. What's the treatment there? Again, no tax when the option is granted. However, and here's the huge difference, when you exercise the non-qualified options, that's when you're taxed. So back to my example of the $5 and option price and these shares have gone up to 10. If you were to exercise the options then, you have $5 of income on exercise. Now bear in mind that's when you're buying shares, so you're laying out $5 and you're also taxed on $5. So this is why if you look at public company SEC documents, you'll very, very frequently see that people are exercising options and selling shares on the very same day. In fact, some plans even have so-called cashless exercises. So non-qualified options, very different, very easy to understand because you can see this sort of compensatory element, the spread in the example, the $5 spread. But that's when you get taxed on the exercise of the non-qualified option.